I finally managed to get my hands on HMS Mohawk, the naval award for the export order event. Let's see if it was worth it. Sitting at 4.7, Mohawk is armed with 8 120mm guns in 4 dual mans. They get a choice between high explosive, semi-armor piercing, high explosive time fuse, and high explosive variable time fuse shells. At this point I hope most of you know what to do with these shells. High explosive will probably be your main shell along with HE-VT, both being decently powerful against most targets you'll face, with the VT of course being a dual purpose shell that's good against aircraft. Whichever you use is primarily down to your personal preference, as there is a difference in damage characteristics. Semi-armor piercing will be your secondary shell, since there are targets out there that certainly need the use of this shell, like cruisers or other HE resistant vessels. High explosive time fuse is practically a shell you can ignore, since Mohawk is a premium and comes unlocked with everything, so why even bother with the HETF? So, quite a good choice of shells, and with a reload of 6.5 to 5 seconds, these guns can pack quite a punch. Other than that, Mohawk has alright gun handling, decent accuracy, decent velocity, and decent reverse rates. The two super firing turrets, namely turret B and X according to the British convention, also rotate 360 degrees, which is very pleasant. I will say though that there are a lot of situations where your rearmost gun turret doesn't quite have the angle to fire at your target when you angle the Mohawk a decent amount, but it's not really a problem. The only weakness is the gun mounts themselves, with open gun mounts being very vulnerable to overpressure damage from high explosive. So be aware that Mohawk can and will lose her guns easily. As for her other gun armament, we see a single quadruple 40mm mount and 2 quadruple Vickers 50 cal mounts. Surprisingly decent anti-air suite with a surprisingly high volume of fire. A negative might be the rather lengthy reload for these guns, but their large belts make this a somewhat negligible problem. This anti-air suite is pretty standard for similar vessels in the British Navy around this BR, so if you're familiar with them, you're familiar with Mohawk. And for the explosive armament we see 2 depth charges, which you can of course just ignore. Then there's the 4 torpedoes in a single quadruple launcher. These have a payload of 340 kg of TNT equivalent, and depending on whether you have the torpedo mode modification enabled or not, a range of 9.6 km with a speed of 67 km an hour, or a range of 12.35 km with a speed of 56 km an hour. These are pretty basic torpedoes that are more than good enough against destroyers. They're most likely not going to knock out a cruiser with one hit. They are fine, but nothing too special. Mobility-wise, Mohawk is pretty standard. A top speed of 67 km an hour is pretty normal for her BR bracket, and her rudder responsiveness and overall turning are quite decent. The only weaker points are the way she loses speed in a turn and her somewhat slow acceleration and deceleration. But these weak points are in no way deal breakers, just something to take into account. In the survivability department, there, Mohawk is again rather standard. Though one noticeable problem is just how easily her main guns are knocked out. You'll often lose half your guns in any one engagement with another player, if not more. This, paired with a vulnerable ready ammo right next to these guns, can often lead to catastrophic damage. In short, her hull is standard, her guns are vulnerable. So, is it worth it? I don't really know. I couldn't get her for free, so I had to buy it from the market, though I thankfully had some Gaijin coin laying around. Though at a price of 16 Gaijin coin it's a bit overpriced, especially since you can buy HMS Jervis for 1000 golden eagles or roughly 6.6 euros where I am. So a good 10 euros cheaper. And the HMS Jervis sits at the same rank with economic bonuses that aren't that much worse. I think that as a British naval fan it isn't too expensive to buy, but it being more than double the price of a similar premium vessel is something to certainly consider. Though for those with some Gaijin coin laying around, it really is not a bad premium to pick up. That's it for this video. Goodbye, and may the seas be calm.